It's time for another edition of Lewis at Large with Warner Lewis. 60 minutes of smart talk radio with interesting guests from all walks of life begins right now. So sit back and enjoy. And now, from the flight deck, here's your host, Warner Lewis.
Well, welcome everybody to another segment of Lewis at Large. Yours truly, Warner Lewis from the flight deck. And of course, that means more smart talk radio is in your future, and this segment, an interesting one indeed. We're going to be talking about a story that you know, about a character that you know of, and we're going to go behind the scenes just a little bit. The brand new work is called True North. Our guest is Tom North. It is subtitled The Shocking Truth About Yours, Mine, and Ours, which, if you'll remember, was a very, very well-known popular movie in 1968 starring Lucille Ball and Henry Fonda. It's the story of 18 children put together in one family. That's not much of a setup, but that doesn't matter. Tom, how are you, my friend?
I'm well, Warner, and thanks for having me on your show.
Yeah, you bet. Tom, we talk a lot. This show reaches a lot of baby boomers, and Yours, Mine, and Ours was sort of the consummate baby boomer movie at the time. Let's do a little bit better setup here. Share with us a little bit about the Beardsley family and the North family, and just give us some basic setup. We're starting, frankly, wherever you wish.
All right, thank you, Warner. So to give your listeners a little bit of background, Helen North had 8 children. She was a widow. And Frank Beardsley had 10 children. He was a widower. And they met in 1961, were married, and immediately formed one of the largest families in the country. This story was a media story at the time, a public interest story, and was captured by newspapers all over the country. Lucille Ball saw the story, probably in the LA Times, and called my mother, Helen North, and my stepfather, Frank Beardsley, and talked about making a film. And keep in mind that this was the 1960s. It was an era of the sitcoms about suburban white families in suburban America. Stories like Leave It to Beaver and Ozzie and Harriet, My Three Sons. This was the television fare of the day. And Lucille Ball wanted to make a sitcom that was, you could say, was on steroids. And so she did, and it was very successful. It came out in 1968. It was called Yours, Mine, and Ours. And it was the 4th highest grossing film of the year. It was both critically and financially successful at the time.
Tom, another thing too, and I think this is an important part because I think it was important to you. Tell us a little bit about your father, who was Mr. North. He was in the service, and he was a test pilot, was he not?
He was. Actually, he was a bombardier navigator, and he had come up through the ranks, which very few Navy officers do. And during late World War II, he was a distinguished aviator. But he was a lieutenant junior grade when he died, and he was flying A-3Ds. Now, this was an experimental aircraft. The Navy was trying to produce a hybrid fighter bomber, and it was flawed, and more than half of them crashed or fell apart in the sky because their engines were too big, and they just vibrated to pieces. So he was a victim of one of those crashes, and he died in 1960, leaving my mother with 7 children and pregnant. So there she was, 30 years old, with 7 kids and 1 in the oven, and she loses her husband. And I can't even imagine how devastating that must have been. But there she was, and she had to deal with that. So with my father out of the picture, she was advised to move her family from Washington State, where the Navy base was, to California, where she had more family and more of a support system. So she did that, and when that happened, that's when she met Mr. Beardsley.
Anybody that knows Tom North knows of his work and of his life, knows that he is a very spiritual person. He's very thinks long and hard and deep about many things, and that is the result, undoubtedly, of many things that happened as part of this unique family and his unique childhood. Tom, why don't you, if you would, you talk about it obviously in depth in True North, but take us behind the scenes, so to speak. When we think of Yours, Mine, and Ours, like you said, we think of this sort of suburban white sitcom where everything ultimately resolves itself in 30 minutes or a couple of hours. But that, in reality, was really not the case, was it?
No, it wasn't, and it's a good point you raised there, Warner, because when Lucille Ball came to Carmel to learn something about the family and the character that she was going to play in the film, after just a very short while, she took my mother aside after she had met my mom and my stepdad, and she took my mother aside and admonished her, saying, "You keep that man away from me." And what she was referring to was that he was, in my terminology, this is not clinical terminology, but I just can't find a better word to describe him, but he was psychotic. And so he was a dangerous person to be around, and Lucille Ball picked up on that right away. So my mother, I'm sure she had a serious moment there where she gulped and said, "Well, okay, I will." And Lucille Ball didn't spend a lot of time around the family, primarily because of the presence of Mr. Beardsley.
Tom, I don't want to, I'm curious this because, again, my sense was your mother was someone of tremendous integrity, and I'm curious, did she, in your opinion, not see this, or was it just something that she sort of put to the side? So
my mother was a very religious woman, and she grew up as a Catholic during the World War II years, and was very much a woman of her generation. So one of the characteristics or character traits that developed during the World War II years was selflessness, because everyone contributed to the war effort. And so this very much defined her as a person, and she was always looking to help other people. So when she came upon this man with 10 children, and he was clearly underqualified for the role of sole parent, she thought to herself, well, the best thing I can do is I can marry him, and I will save his children from him, and I will save him from himself. So that's quite a grandiose plan, and she actually failed at the effort. But in the meantime, as she created this environment with 18 children in it, which soon became 20 because they had 2 more within the first 3 years of marriage. As she created this new environment with this giant family, it became more and more complicated, and she lost control of it. But what she had done is she had taken her own 8 children into a very dangerous environment, and then she lost control of it.
So her awareness of the potential danger obviously was not terribly high. Any particular reason why you felt that was sort of a blind spot with her, or just did he change?
I think she really felt that love conquers all, and if she loved everyone enough, then he would change. That's naive at best, and in his case, he was a very, very damaged person from his own childhood. And I write more about that later in the book and talk about the circumstances in which he grew up, which created his persona, which was very dark, very devious. Basically, he was criminally minded. And so there's no way that she could overcome that. But she had the best of intentions.
Again, if you just joined us, yours truly, Warner Lewis from the flight deck of Lewis at Large Radio. In this segment, we're talking to Tom North. He is an author, and he is telling a very poignant story. He was a member of that 18-child family, the Beardsleys in the North. Of for which the 1968 film Yours, Mine, and Ours, starring Lucille Ball and Henry Fonda, was based. He takes us to the inside to scenes that are not quite as cheery, not quite as milquetoast, so to speak, as may have been portrayed in the movie. And we've been talking a little bit about his mother and her relationship with his stepfather. Tom, my understanding was on a hunting trip one time as a young early teenager, you were shot. Is that correct?
That is correct, Warner.
We want to be careful. It wasn't intentional. Is that correct?
Well,
I
can't say whether it was intentional or not, because I was at the time, my brother and my neighbor and myself, we were in our early teens. I was 12, not quite 13, and my brother was 14, and our friend was 15, and we decided to go on a 5-day camping trip and live off the land. So we took a couple of rifles and some, basic cooking equipment, and we were living off the land and actually gaining weight. We were so well fed. But on the third day, I made a very caustic comment to my brother, and the next thing I know, I had a bullet in my chest. So I was kneeling down, rolling up a sleeping bag at the time, so I never saw exactly the trigger being pulled, but I certainly felt the bullet entering my chest. So it was quite an adventure, and I fortunately survived it. But that was one of our more, I guess you would call it a misadventure.
But boy, it makes for a great story.
Yes, it does. It was very exciting. I was just on the wrong end of the gun at that time. But we had to make up a story because it would not have done my brother much good for us to tell the truth. So we made up a story that the gun was leaning against a tree, and he knocked it over, and it discharged, and I was shot as a result. That was the best that we could come up with.
Tom, your family, separately, and then when you were married, spent time, when your families got together, rather, you spent time off the coast in the state of Washington, as well as Carmel, California, which you've already referred. Those would be two places that most people would be very envious of being in those spots. How, in your opinion, growing up in those areas, how did that geography alone have any part of the story at all?
It's a great question, Warner. The family environment that I grew up in the Beardsley household, was extremely toxic. And having spent my formative years in the wilderness in the state of Washington, walking the seashores and walking through the forests and along the creeks and rivers, I found nature to be very alluring and very therapeutic. And so when I came to Carmel, California, and was living in this household where we never knew when the sort of predator was going to be lurking around the next corner, that was my stepfather, I just wanted to be out of there, away. So I went to the beach, and I went to the river, and I went to the hills that are nearby. And nature was very much my refuge. And I kept my sanity by going out and being in nature.
Tom, and again, you're talking about this predator, so it sounds like early on there was distrust for this man. I'm curious, did the feelings that you had for him, were they shared by all the kids, or at least most of the kids on both sides of the family, or was this split down sort of the North Beardsley line? Well,
no, he was a I guess we would say a equal opportunity abuser.
Okay.
And he would, it didn't matter who was around. If you were available, he would pick on you or find some reason to abuse whatever child was handy. And so we were constantly relying on one another to let each other know where he was. And if he was coming home from work, the word would be spread, he's home, run. And so we would all head for the doors and the windows and make ourselves scarce because we never knew who his next victim was going to be.
Tom, was this just physical abuse, or was there sexual abuse involved as well, or was it just literally just getting beaten?
It was unfortunately all of the above.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was, he was a sexual abuser, he was a verbal abuser, he was a physical abuser, an emotional abuser. He was a bad person.
Do you have siblings, step or otherwise, that would challenge this, or would they to a person agree exactly with what you're saying?
Oh, it's a great question, Warner, because the Beardsley family as a group has completely disavowed anything that I've written in the book or anything that I say to the media, and they've made a formal statement to that effect.
Okay. Well, Tom, let's do this. Let's take you from those years, and I guess let's just, I don't know, mid-teens, late teens, if you wish, and then let's take it from there and describe the journey that Tom North went on as a result of this upbringing. We all are who ultimately we were, so take us on that journey a little bit.
Thank you. So what happened is that in my late teens, I really became a very broken person. I was addicted to drugs. I had a very bad attitude, and I made a lot of decisions that reinforced my very seriously damaged self-image. And I had been told by my stepfather that I would never amount. I was a nothing, and I would never amount to anything as long as I had lived, or as long as I lived. Excuse me. And so I really believed that, and so I was in a downward spiral. Through a series of fortunate occurrences and chance meetings, I began to practice transcendental meditation, and that was really the turning point in my life. I began to meditate, and I took to it like a duck to water, and it was very, very, very positive event in my life. And I began to experience more of the positive side of my own awareness. And so as I continued to meditate, my attitude improved. One of the examples of that is that prior to learning to practice TM, I was unable to give a compliment. I was sarcastic. I was cynical. Everything I said had a bite to it. And shortly after learning to practice meditation, I began giving people compliments, and I shocked myself. And people started saying, "Hey, you're different. What are you doing?" And so that was a cumulative process day by day, and really was the turning point in my life. So I was so excited about that I wanted to do this as much as I could, and I learned that there was a college in Iowa called Maharishi International University. It's now called Maharishi University of Management. But we used to call it, affectionately, we would call it MIU. And so I was a student there for 4 years, and it was a magical time in my life, and contributed very, very deeply to my own recovery.
Tom, did your and again we're talking to Tom North. The work is called True North: The Shocking Truth About Yours, Mine, and Ours. It's an inspirational story of survival and hope, all based around the family union of the Beardsleys in the North, which was ultimately to become the subject of the movie Yours, Mine, and Ours. Tom, did your siblings, again, those that in your opinion went through events and abuse similar to you at the hands of your stepfather, did they go on a similar journey, or bring us up to date about them?
Well, it's interesting that eventually 11 members of the family began to practice TM, because when I went home to visit the children, I left home at the age of 17 as soon as I graduated from high school, and started practicing TM when I was 22, and would go home from time to time to visit the younger children. And they would say, "Gosh, you're different." And my mother would say, "You're different, and what's going on in your life?" So I shared that with her, and so we actually organized a introductory TM lecture for the whole family. And eventually 11 of them learned to practice TM. So a lot of the adults, or the people who were children then, are now adults, and a lot of them have gone through therapy and have taken their own path towards healing. And some of them haven't. So it's all over the map.
What about, as you look back on things, once you began the meditation and sort of soul searching and all of that, anything that in that period up until now that you would have changed, or has this been really just basically a lifelong healing process for you? I
would say it's the latter, Warner. It's really been a lifelong healing process, and I don't think it's over. I'm amazed on a daily basis the things that I learn from other people. I was just as I was driving home to join you on your show, I was listening to NPR, and there was an author who has written a book who was being interviewed on one of the NPR shows, and his central character was a woman who had gone through domestic violence and had been abused as a child. And her quote was stunning, and she said, "It's hard to get over abuse when the crime was committed in your body." That's a very powerful statement. Yeah, indeed. And again, I also wanted to circle back again. So tell me again to your siblings, and let's at this point let's just keep it limited if we want to the North siblings. How close are you? What kind of contact do you have with them these days? It's a great question. The families really split when my mother passed away in 2000, and there's not a lot of contact between the two families. The North family is very much in contact. In fact, we have been since my mother passed away. We've gotten together every 2 to 3 years for a family reunion. And that way we have an opportunity to have all the cousins and siblings create more of a positive history to share. And that's been a very, very, very positive growth activity that we've engaged in. Right. But there's been no contact, so to speak, other than maybe, I don't know, legal or whatever with the Beardsleys? None at all. Okay. So they're all pretty much aligned, so to speak, not necessarily against, but away from the North family. That's correct. I see. Well, Tom, it seems sort of obvious here, I guess, but as we start to wind down here, what's sort of your takeaway, and sort of beyond that, what takeaway would you share with our audience? I think that unfortunately many of us have had difficult childhoods. There's certainly no manual or set of guidelines for being a good parent, and unfortunately a lot of people fail at that, and their children suffer as a result. So many of us have had difficult childhoods, and it's not so much what we go through that defines us as what we do with it. And it's important to remember that in spite of what we experienced at the hands of those who were supposed to be our guides in early life, we can take the broken pieces of our lives and put them back together and be happy people and fulfilled people and successful in our lives. It's a day-by-day process, and we can't take a single moment for granted. We have to be present, and we have to look for the best in everyone we meet and in every circumstance that we find ourselves in. That's the takeaway. Well, it is a little bit alarming, but it is also inspiring. Indeed, the work is called True North: The Shocking Truth About Yours, Mine, and Ours by Tom North, who was there, lived it in the first person very intensely. Tom, how can people find out more about the book? And I also know you have a blog and you do some other writing as well. Yes, and I have a website, which is truenorthbytomnorth.com. And you can find my blogs on the website. And the book has won an award the Living Now Award from the Independent Book Publishing Association. And so you can find a whole lot of resources if you're interested in self-improvement. There's a resource guide at the end of the book and on the website. So I highly recommend that people look at our website, and the book is also available on the website.
Well, I appreciate you sharing very, quite frankly, intimate family secrets and some difficult experiences that you went through in the hopes of helping others. And what you got planned for some more work, or what are you going to do now?
My next book is called The Economics of Spiritual Transformation. So I'm working on that now.
Well, Tom, again, thank you so much for spending part of your day with us, and would like to have you back on again sometime.
I'll look forward to it, Warner. Thank you very much for having me on your show.
You bet. We will be back with more right after this on Lewis at Large.